Good afternoon. It's Friday the 20th of June 2024, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Mike Robinson. Joining me by video link today, we have Ben Rubin and Debi Evans. Thanks for joining us both. Everybody else is at the Sounds Beautiful Festival at the moment, so I hope they're getting great weather. And Charles and I will arrive at that tomorrow. So let's get on, and we're going to kick off with the London Climate Action Week, which is taking place this week, I should say. And next week, then, Ben is going to cover this in much more detail once we see what the final outcome of this is. But I just wanted to go into a little bit of an introduction on it. 20 years of climate politics is E3G's claim. And of course, alongside Sadiq Khan, this organisation is the one that helped set this climate conference up. It's an annual event. I just thought we'd have a look through for E3G, the list of sponsors and so on, because it's the usual list of suspects. We've got Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, we've got Bulb, Chatham House, we've got various councils and so on in there as well. Who else have we got? Canadian government, we've got the UK government, we've got the EU, we've got the Esme Fairbairn Foundation. We've got Hewlett Foundation, the Friedrich Mulder Foundation, a whole bunch of tax-exempt foundations, think tanks, and government institutions, Konrad Adenauer Stiftung, London Sustainable Development Commission, the Oak Foundation, Open Societies Foundation. Ben, it's the usual list of suspects there. What more can we say?
Yeah, this is the big play. It's the climate cabal. That's what I like to call them. And they are absolutely obsessed with this agenda. It's the big push.
It is indeed. And of course, ending up with the World Wildlife Foundation or World Wildlife Fund there, of course. So let's say originally established in 2019. This is the focus of the Climate Action Week for 2024. First of all, they're saying the road to climate ambition at COP30. So they're saying here that this is with a focus on the cooperation, politics and diplomacy needed to deliver a 1.5C aligned outcome in 2025. So they're hooking in all the politics with this one. Then we've got to hook in all the finance, of course, because financing the global climate transition is exploring how reform of public and private finance systems can support a new global finance goal at COP29. And of course, this is public-private partnerships. Delivering net zero and resilient UK with pre or post-election discussions on how to deliver the transformations needed across the UK. So how they're going to deliver the transformation in the UK, of course, Keir Starmer, as Debi has been pointing out, is all about change and delivery of transformation. And then finally, mobilising whole of society climate action. So this is a focus on mobilising key networks in law, education, health, fashion, arts, culture, and beyond. A core set of flagship events across all these themes is already in preparation, and the aim is to make this significantly more visible globally and to Londoners in 2024. So a total propaganda operation at work there as well. But of course, we could not miss John Kerry, who is making lots of money pushing this particular agenda. And so yesterday apparently was the 5th anniversary of the UK passing net zero into law. And so John Kerry took advantage of that anniversary, along with Chris Skidmore there, nearly got his name wrong. Some people might understand how. The former Energy Secretary at the time to launch the Climate Action Coalition. This is what they're describing it as. So the Climate Action Coalition, we don't really know, Ben, what the likely outcome of that is going to be or what kind of organisation is that going to be. There's not too much information about it just yet. So undoubtedly you'll have something to say about this next week. But the other thing, one of the big organisations that is featured at this event, of course, is C40 Cities. We've been talking about them for a very long time, so it's hardly a surprise that they are taking part in this. And we have a short clip as the Deputy, what is he? I can't remember what he is. He's a deputy to Sadiq Khan. Anyway, I'll find out in a second and tell you after the video clip. Is talking about a new initiative to deal with goods vehicles in cities.
I do just want to know, pay particular tribute, though, to the work of C40, which is the global network of megacities that Sadiq chairs. They've been working with the Climate Pledge on the Lane Shift Initiative, which is an example of how major cities across the world can work together to reduce carbon footprint, the carbon emissions from their delivery fleets.
So that's all done under the banner of C40 Cities, which Sadiq Khan is a founder of. That was Richard Watts, who's Deputy Chief of Staff for Sadiq Khan. This whole initiative was launched, let's have a look at this one, as a result of the climate pledge. So this is launching an initiative to decarbonize heavy-duty truck emissions. They launched it in Rio de Janeiro in June, earlier in the month. But Ben, this is probably the biggest problem that the climate change advocates have is when we're looking at heavy goods vehicles, whether that be road transport or shipping. This is an area which is practically impossible to electrify because of the energy requirements.
Yes, absolutely. But it's not stopping them from saying that they are going to be able to do it and putting a lot of money into it and building big propaganda campaigns. So achieving the impossible seems to be on the agenda for these people.
So just very briefly then, Ben, for next week, what do you think are the key takeaways that are likely to be on your report next week then?
I think the main thing to understand is that this is really, as I said at the start, this is the big international play. And I called it a climate cabal. And I did that purposefully because I see this as a globally coordinated criminal enterprise, essentially, an unholy alliance between money and power to wrest control of the global system away from citizens.
Yeah, and sorry, the key point here, Ben, isn't it, is if we're looking at organizations like Sadiq Khan, C40 Cities, which he founded, and all these various players that have been funding this organization or this conference, this is as far away from politics and democracy as it's possible to get.
Well, absolutely, yes. Well, they talk a lot about democracy, but they seem to be trying to subvert it at every single opportunity, as I'm going to come on to a little bit later, actually.
Well, let's come on then to Daniel Sachs. I haven't heard of this person. Who is he?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So, well, he's a very interesting character. I'm going to talk about basically global networks of money and power and how they exert their influence into national political systems, including right down to the very front line of UK politics, into Keir Starmer's inner circle of partners and advisors. And we're going to talk about this fella, Daniel Sachs, who is a Swedish businessman. And also, amongst that, a senior advisor to Chatham House, one of 7 trustees to the Open Societies Foundation, and he's also vice chair of the board there, working directly with formerly George Soros, now Alex Soros, who's taken on leadership of that organization. He's also the chairman of the Open Societies Investment Committee. So he directs all of their money, like where it goes to, what they invest in. He's a founding member of the European Council on Foreign Relations, and he's also a young global leader of the World Economic Forum. He graduated from that program in 2007. So he is a anonymous and unknown, but extremely well-connected and influential individual. He's also a director at something called Wallenberg Investments, and Marcus Wallenberg, who's the chief executive of that organization, is on the Bilderberg steering committee. So he is indirectly linked into the Bilderberg meetings, and he also runs his own foundation, the Daniel Sachs Foundation, DSF, which was founded in 2010. Now, what are they up to, right? It gets really interesting. So the foundation talks about the path towards a vital democracy being paved by a new generation empowered to reimagine a shared future. Right? So this is about democracy. It's about empowering a new type of citizen, ultimately. Yeah, and you can see the image in the background there. This is very clearly targeted towards these neo-Marxist intersectional issues around race, gender, or anything else that they can use to get traction for their ideas. right? They talk about their mission as building new initiatives in a space that they describe as funded activism. I've not heard this term before. This has come from the Daniel Sachs Foundation. And for my money, this is essentially doing whatever it takes to progress their agenda for change across the whole of Europe, actually, and beyond that, as we'll get into. Now, they have a very structured process for doing this, right? So they have an innovation process which starts with understanding and mapping, gathering data, doing research, looking into the situation. The second step is ideation and solution design, so coming up with a plan for what we're going to do, and then piloting that. So basically testing, learning, iterating, refining. And then once you've established a coherent and successful model, scaling it and allowing it to become independent, i.e., allowing it to stand on its own 2 feet and no longer requiring support, whether financial or otherwise, from the Daniel Sachs Foundation. And this is a very similar approach to what you would see in any innovation hub, to what you would see at Nesta, for example. They all have a variation on this type of process. This is how transformational change is distributed across the system. Now, I'll just introduce you to one more person. So this is Paul Alarcon, who is the General Secretary of the Daniel Sachs Foundation. They don't have a huge team there. It's very much money and a couple of people. And we'll get into how their activities actually play out in a moment. But just worth noting that Mr. Alarcon is also an Obama leader for Europe. He was made one in 2023. And he's also quite keen for us to know that he's Jewish, right? So he's this is from another interview that I found on YouTube. You can see the picture in the background there. The quote says, "The world was created for me," which is from the Talmud. And that is quite a striking statement, I think. And you can see also there in the background, that is a 6-pointed star, right? So he's telling us that he's Jewish. And I guess we should assume that Mr. Sachs is as well. That's a very Jewish surname. So you've got these two guys up in Sweden running this foundation. And then how does that actually manifest, this funded activism that they talk about? So they've got a portfolio of stuff that they do. Right. The first thing is Multitudes Foundation, and that's about providing financial support to left-wing activist groups, real kind of grassroots organizations all across Europe, particularly those led by non-natives. And I'll get into this a lot more in a moment. They have something else called Run for Office, which is basically like an exemplar of one of those left-wing activist groups in Sweden. It's a bit like MLMS, My Life, My Say, that we've been talking about over the past few months. I'm going to talk about Multitudes and Run for Office now properly, but then later in the show, I'm going to get into the more institutional side of things, looking at the Apolitical Foundation and Apolitical. Those are focused on politicians and civil servants. And we don't have time to go through all of this stuff right now. And to be honest with you, I could probably spend 2, 3, 4, 5 hours sitting here going through the activities of Mr. Sachs. But we're just going to go through the key topics right now. So let's have a little look at Multitudes. So what do they say that they do? We support people and initiatives across Europe to reimagine politics. They're focused on what they call change makers. So these are people who want to have a real disruptive influence on the systems that they're part of. This is targeted towards immigrant communities. You can see the images on the left-hand side there. These are Afro-Caribbean people. I think there's an East Asian person in the image on the right-hand side. So these are not traditional European populations, right? They're deliberately going out and seeking these communities and giving them the resources to, as they say, break through existing power structures. And this is very much about breaking the existing social structures that are in place within European societies. Sachs and Alarcon, they're both on the board, as well as, and I'm not going to go through the whole leadership team or anything, just a couple that jumped out at me. Sei Akiwowo, who I'm coming across more and more. She's a former Newham councillor in London, and she gets absolutely everywhere. She was on the Twitter Trust and Safety team for a while. She's involved with a bunch of foundations, some of which Mike's already talked about earlier on the show. And then also Gary van Gulik, who is Dutch, She's a co-founder of the Multitudes Foundation, and she's going to now tell us a little bit about what she finds so exciting about the work that they're doing.
I want to be part of co-creating the world we want to see instead of tearing down the world we have, right? So moving from just criticizing to building. And the hope that I saw was exactly what Lisa's talking about. All across Europe, because we work across Europe in all countries here, we started seeing these ideas, brilliant ideas, people who are organizing, because organizing is part of politics, right? It's all one continuum. So organizing on issues, people who are starting to run for office who normally wouldn't have. And all of them told the same story. We have ideas, but we don't have support. We don't have money. We don't have the backing. And our inspiration was, can we create a nonpartisan safety net, a backbone of support, basically, to say, we have your backs. We want to try this. Let's try it together with other funders. We're going to innovate this entire space. And so that's sort of the driving force of hope that we see all across the region, actually. And so I feel very, very proud to support them from behind and to see all these new initiatives around this region pop up. And we've now funded over 13 different new initiatives that are building up in this space.
So the soundtrack made that feel really inspirational and uplifting, didn't it? But when you actually listen to what she just said, essentially they're going around Europe seeking out people who have got radical left-wing political ideas, but have got no backing or support for those ideas, right? Really crucial, because they talk about democracy a lot. And again, we talked about this earlier in this show. Everything's being done in the name of democracy, protecting democracy. But actually what they're doing is finding people who've got no democratic mandate, they've got no backing, and they're giving them money, they're giving them a network, and they're helping to elevate them in spite of that. Right? And this, to me, is a totally artificial realignment of political and social systems across the whole of Europe. She talked about 13 organizations that the Multitudes Foundation are working with, but it's also beyond that. It's global. So we can see here, this is Luminate. So Van Gulik, Gary Van Gulik, who we just listened to there, she's one of the directors at Multitudes. She's also part of this organization, which is doing a similar thing across Africa, Asia, and Latin America. So this is a truly global network seeking to effect a radical transformation of political systems. And it's not just theoretical, right? They're also hands-on. So this is Run for Office. This is the second Daniel Sachs Foundation organization I'm going to touch on before I get into the Apolitical Foundation later on in the show. And this is, as they describe it, a youth movement for social change, presented as some kind of organic thing, but actually it's been constructed by the Daniel Sachs Foundation. It's about getting people, young people, into the political system, very clearly aimed at an Afro-Caribbean audience. Yes, if you can see there, if we can get that back onto the screen, that's not a native Swede, right? That is the facial features of an African immigrant. Right? This is very clearly ideologically aligned towards immigrant communities and to being disruptive and destructive to existing social structures. And Mr. Sachs takes a very personal interest in this. And actually, recently, this is just in the past couple of weeks, he's been out in schools and in universities speaking to young individuals from these communities to get them into his political program that he's using to transform Western society. And as I said, there'll be more on this later in the show.
I do apologize. We're muted there. Debi, I welcome you to the program now. And well, if climate change is one of the is one of the transformational agendas that we see at the moment, health care is the other one, or another key one anyway. So what's the latest on the MHRA?
Well, yes. Good afternoon, everybody. And well, before I get on to the MHRA, it seems that people are leaving in their droves like rats off sinking ships. And the latest casualty, or the latest one to jump off the sinking ship, is Ian Trenholm, who's stepping down as CQC's chief executive. This has only just been announced. However, the CQC have appointed and announced an interim CEO, which is going to be the Deputy Kate Tirone, unlike, of course, our good friend Dame June Rain. And I can't possibly do a news without mentioning Dame June Rain. So here we go. She's due to step down, and we know that her last board meeting is next month. And you can see there the picture of her unveiling her portrait. She likes to go back to Somerville and give lectures. And the lecture there was A Prepared Mind, Dr. June Rain, on approving vaccines. And I'm sure you'll love the portrait. And then for the eagle-eyed viewers of you, I'm sure you're looking at the badges, possibly, or the brooches that these ladies are wearing. And I thought I'd just do a little close-up so you can see them. Not quite sure about Dame June Rains there, but clearly I'm sure people will make up their minds about the other badge. But I just want to thank all of our viewers so much for emailing the MHRA to find out, well, where is your board meeting? And thank you to Roger, thank you to Alison, because they got this email and they sent it through to me. And it says, thank you for your email. And what I thought was very strange was this first paragraph. A general election will take place on Thursday, the 4th of July. All civil servants and organisations are required to follow the Cabinet Office General Election Guidance. Essential MHRA regulatory functions and services continue as normal during this period. While the agency board meeting will take place on the 9th of July as scheduled, we will now not be holding it in public and live streaming the meeting. It will be recorded and made available on the MHRA website in due course. Our next agency board meeting to be held in public takes place on the 17th of September 2024, and we will publish the registration details on our website ahead of this date.
Debi,
Wow.
sorry to interrupt. Sorry to interrupt here, but correct me if I'm wrong, but the date of the general election is the 4th of July.
Correct.
So why do they need to be worried about something that's taking place on the 9th of July?
That's another question maybe our viewers and listeners might like to send to the MHRA. I think it's a very valid one, Mike, because clearly now the doors have been slammed in our face. So I've taken to Twitter, and please come and follow me on Twitter, Debi with an I, DEBI, Evans at UKC, sorry, I always get it round the wrong way, at Debi, DEBI, Evans, UKC. So I've put out a few tweets because I'm really quite concerned that who is in charge of the MHRA? And then I put out a little bit of a rant, and I think you might have it here. Can we listen to it, Mike?
We can. Yes, we can.
Org. You may remember I've been looking for Dame June Rain, and I've been wondering why the MHRA board meeting scheduled for the 9th of July has suddenly miraculously disappeared. Especially as it's meant to be Dame June Rain's last meeting. Where has she gone? Where has she gone? Where will she go? Who knows? Will we ever find out? Well, yes, we will. And thank you so much to one of our amazing viewers, Alison, who received an email from the MHRA who say, while the agency board meeting will take place on the 9th of July, remember that, will take place on the 9th of July as scheduled, we will not now be holding it in public and live streaming the meeting. It will be recorded and made available on the MHRA website in due course. Our next agency board meeting to be held in public takes place on the 17th of September 2024, and we will publish the registration details on our website ahead of this date. But why have you cancelled this public meeting, MHRA? The last meeting that June Rain is due to attend. Are we not allowed to see what goes on behind the doors of the MHRA? I thought you were transparent. I thought you were here for public safety. I thought you were keen for the public to watch what goes on behind closed doors. So why have you slammed them in our face? What are you hiding? Are we coming back in September to find a new CEO, or maybe no CEO, of the Medicines Health Regulatory Agency? The MHRA to keep you safe. Why did you cancel it? What are you hiding? We still want to know. Where are you going, Dame June? And as of now, I still don't know. I'm sorry, but she's disappearing and we won't get the chance to wave her goodbye.
Yeah, it is a tragedy. And, well, maybe a bit of pressure can change that. We need to find out what's wrong with the 9th of July. It's several days after the election, so I'm not sure that's a positive excuse. Anyway, if you like what the UK column does, you would like to support us, please head over to support.ukcolumn.org. Options to help us out are there, and we do need your support. It's only you that is keeping us going. ukcolumn.org and ukcolumnextracts.co.uk are the main places to go if you should be able to share our material. Facebook, of course, no longer available to us, and so hopefully most people have been watching this program on Facebook have worked out how to find it elsewhere. You could pick something up at the UK Column shop, and if you're at the Sounds Beautiful Festival, well, Claire is there with a whole bunch of stuff, so hopefully you're able to go and speak to people there. And if you haven't got a copy of Agenda 21, Your Life in Their Hands yet, we're asking everybody to pick up a copy of this. Please do share it around, get the word out on this if you possibly can. Now, a date for your diary. We will have more details on this next week. Saturday the 19th of October 2024, a live event in Bristol in a proper venue. You'll get to meet us and a whole bunch of other fantastic speakers. It's going to be a great event. If you can get to keep that date for your diary, details coming soon. Okay, now let's move on to Ukraine. And well, yesterday, a lot going on with respect to Ukraine and the European Union. Vladimir Zelensky was in Brussels for a whole host of different things. So let's have a look at what he was doing. First of all, he was signing paperwork. So the European Union and two other member countries, that's Lithuania and Estonia, signed security agreements with Zelensky at the summit yesterday. This is apparently to help Ukraine in 9 areas of security and defense policy, including arms deliveries, training, defense industry cooperation, demining. They're not talking about personnel yet, but we'll see where that's going in a second. So, of course, Ukraine already has these types of agreements with other countries like the United States, Britain, France, and Germany, and so on. Then the other thing that happened yesterday at the EU was that they all got together to agree to begin the process of Ukrainian accession to the European Union. So European expansionism, EU expansionism continues eastwards, of course, putting continued pressure and increasing pressure on Russia. Here is the president, because one of the presidents of the EU, this is the president of the European Parliament, Roberta Metsola, tweeting out, as we launch accession negotiations with Ukraine today, we also open a new chapter that strengthens our political bond and deepens our security commitment to reiterate our unshakable support to help Ukraine defend itself, to work towards peace, because everybody knows that peace only happens when you've had a war. So therefore, that's how they're working towards peace. Who else was talking about this? Well, Ursula von der Leyen, of course. Dear Volodymyr Zelensky, the opening of accession negotiations was an historic moment. You will find your rightful place in our union. Today, we disperse a new 1.5 billion euros under the Ukraine facility to keep Ukrainian state running as you fight for freedom. So let's just have a look and at a couple of seconds of Roberta. She, a reminder, is the president of the European Parliament, and what she had to say.
And the start of accession negotiations with Ukraine and Moldova, we are sending the clearest of messages of our unwavering support for Ukraine, our common security, and the geopolitical importance of enlargement.
Just think about that, the geopolitical importance of enlargement. They know exactly what they're doing. They understand exactly the implications of what they're doing. The push eastwards, putting more and more pressure on Russia, and geopolitically, it's a very dangerous situation. Following all that, then, Zelensky went off and met Jens Stoltenberg. Jens Stoltenberg, the outgoing head of NATO, Jens's last NATO summit will be in a couple of weeks' time. So Stoltenberg welcomed Zelensky to NATO headquarters to discuss final preparations for the NATO summit. At the summit, increasing support for Ukraine will be top priority for allied leaders. So there we go. This is what Jens had to say. Zelensky then was talking about further peace summit following on from the so-called peace summit that took place in Switzerland a week or so ago, where Russia was not invited, of course. He wants to have a second one. Let's just have a listen to what he said.
We have to find and to prepare this plan and to put this plan on the table during months. We don't have too much time because we have a lot of wounded and dead people on the battlefield and through civilians. That's why we don't want to have this war during years. So that's why we want to prepare this joint plan, put it on the table to the second peace summit.
So I could be wrong about this, but this is the first time I've heard him openly acknowledge dead and wounded in this way. And in fact, another quote here, many people are dying. We don't have the men to continue this war much longer, is one of the things he said. So this is quite an admission. And I do wonder, I think anybody that has entered into a defence pact with Ukraine recently, I think we need to be looking at the text of those agreements very, very closely, because although there's no discussion about sending, human beings to the front line from outside of Ukraine, other than to provide training in Ukraine, but not to the front line, I just wonder where that will go. But just slight criticism of his use of the English language there, which is perhaps a little ironic, because the Ukrainians in Ukrainian Pravda have just announced that they have signed a law officially establishing English as one of the languages of international communication in the country. So English is now going to be mandatory for heads of local state administrations, servicemen of the officer corps, prosecutors, tax officials, customs officers, heads and teachers of institutions of higher education and scientific institutions, heads of healthcare institutions, and so on. So Russian, of course, was traditionally the language in the Eastern Bloc. That's no longer going to be the case in Ukraine. Perhaps Vladimir himself needs to be taking a few extra English lessons himself. Now, let's come back then, leave Ukraine for now and come back onto health. And Debi, do we all need an MOT?
I think some of us are going to, yes, for sure. But things have been pretty desperate in A&E. We've been talking about corridor care, we've been talking about cupboard care even, and things have been getting a bit desperate in Kent. And I picked up this story where a patient who'd got fed up with waiting in A&E for so long had contacted his friend, and his friend had brought in a mattress so that he could lie down on the floor in A&E because he didn't feel very well. There was altercations with nurses. He got told it was an infection risk. He got told it was an obstacle, and he had to remove the mattress. However, we need to keep our eyes on A&E, and I picked up this story as well in Sky, which says that you're going to need a health MOT if you want to get through the front door of A&E. And I was absolutely horrified, and I needed to have a look a little bit further on, because apparently this is going to be a lifeline. And what it's saying is that over 1 million people over the age of 75 are admitted each year, and 1/5 of them are frail. It says that there'll be MOTs at the front door, and you'll be told to give a history of falls, and maybe you'll need to have your blood pressure done, and you'll need a review. But what are these tests? Are we going to be asked to have PCR tests? Because they're looking at people over the age of 65 to have all of these tests. These tests are going to be available 10 hours a day, literally. But my question is, what tests are you going to be asked to have before you get admission into A&E? So I went to look at the urgent emergency care recovery plan, which they were talking about. And of course, this isn't about recovering patients. This is about recovering the service. So when we look further in at the plan, we can see that actually they're looking at discharge. They want people to be discharged as soon as possible, and they're going to transfer people into care transfer hubs. They're spending 1.6 billion, literally focused squarely on discharge. So what they're saying is that 20% of emergency admissions can be avoided with the right care in place. And all of this is going to be about frailty. So ahead of next winter, they're going to offer what they call joined up care. And this means virtual wards. But actually, what is a community care hub? Well, I can tell you what a community care hub is. It's not, I was thinking maybe it was a porter cabin in the car park of the hospital. It isn't. It's a team. So for people that don't pass the test to get through A&E, they will be sent home, and a community care team, whoever that is and whatever qualifications they have, will be sent to your home. So this isn't a hub as such that you people will be placed in. You will literally be sent home, and this will be your bed or a hospital bed in your house. So they're trying to make us as sick as possible and then deny us access to emergency healthcare, or at least make emergency healthcare conditional. And I have heard that the age limit for this MOT may be reduced to 55. So we need to be keeping an eye on what is going on in our hospitals, especially A&E. And if you're elderly, if you've got an elderly relative, we really need to be thinking, what are they going to be asked to do before they get through those A&E doors?
Well, indeed, Debbie, and of course the problem is that the reason that people are queuing up at A&E doors is because they have no access to primary care locally, and this problem is not going to go away in a hurry. So, surely the issue here is that we've got to get GPs functioning properly.
100%, and it's very telling to know that there are lots of GP vacancies. And there are GPs out there that are saying they're twiddling their thumbs and they're doing nothing. So what is going on?
Okay, thank you, Debbie. Now, Ben, let's come back to you and more on Daniel Sachs.
Yes, so earlier in the show, we looked at the Daniel Sachs Foundation and the Multitudes Foundation, which is one of its key initiatives focused on breaking traditional power structures, in their own words. We're now going to look at where Daniel Sachs's interests meet the institutions. We're going to look at two organisations with similar names, Apolitical and the Apolitical Foundation. Now, just to dig into the word, right, this is important, what's being communicated to us here. Apolitical, one word, means not political. But if you look at the weighting in the text, we can get the logo back up onto screen, you can see that the A and the political have actually got different weighting. I think this is deliberate. And actually what we're looking at here is a political foundation for global governance. Yeah? Nothing short of that. Now, I said that these two organizations were linked to each other. This is their own slide material that I'm showing to you here. Their democracy flywheel. I don't really understand quite what they're getting at here, but this is how they talk about what they do. And the most important thing for us to look at is the Apolitical Foundation being focused primarily on politicians.
Sorry, Ben, sorry, can I just interrupt there a second? Because I'd like to see where in the bottom right-hand corner where it says the people, does that mean you and me, or is this an organization called the people?
Well, that is a good question. I think it means the people that they can get behind their agenda. That's probably what it is, because the actual mass population, if it really understood what they were doing, would not be going along with this at all, which is why they need organizations like Multitudes Foundation, who are actually there deliberately to break traditional social structures, right? That's literally what it's there to do, so that they can then bring in a new political class who have been targeted and groomed and trained by the Apolitical Foundation, as well as civil servants who are actually doing the work within central government who have been groomed and trained by Apolitical. And this is absolutely everywhere. This is systemic. this organization. I'll get into it. Right, so let's focus first on Apolitical Foundation. They talk about restoring hope in political leadership when we need it most. We really need great politicians, and they really do pander to the ego of the political classes. They tell them they're rock stars, when in reality, most of them are narcissistic and venal and compromised, right? But Apolitical is there for them. They've got a big global accelerator program to bring new types of politicians into the political system, non-partisan, i.e. uniparty, right? When you hear non-partisan, it means uniparty. That is exactly what is going on here. They put out an extraordinary amount of content, thought leadership, this here about what they call circular power politics. And it's basically a guide to progressive politicians getting elected, getting into power, and then using power, wielding it to the ends of Apolitical, Daniel Sachs, Chatham House, and all the other organizations that he's linked to. It is truly international, right? Staggering when you get into the scope and the reach of this. They've got 170 countries that they're working in, potentially 500,000 people on their platform. A lot of this being delivered, coordinated out of London. London is a crucial hub for global governance. People really must understand that, particularly the Brits. Yeah, you've got to get a handle on this. We are right in the thick of how this thing is being coordinated and how it's playing out. And it's run by this woman on the left-hand side. That's Lisa Witter. She's the chief executive. She's an American living in Germany. She describes herself as a global citizen. And actually, she does say in the presentation that this slide comes from, that's actually a still from a video. She actually says, we may be in 170 countries, but actually I find it really useful to not think about countries at all. All of this is just global, right? This is the mindset that we're dealing with. And that comes from places like the World Economic Forum. She is a young global leader of the World Economic Forum, just in the same way that Daniel Sachs is. And who are they backed by? Well, a lot of the names that we're very familiar with, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Sigrid Rousing Foundation, the Open Societies Foundation, where Daniel Sachs would have actually signed off the investment because he's the chair of the investment committee, the World Economic Forum, Young Global Leaders, and on and on and on, right? So this is one of the primary instruments being used by those organizations to transform the global system, right? It's absolutely incredible. And the audacity is mind-blowing. And actually, Lisa Witter does say that one of their values is audacity. And I think that they do a very good job of living up to that. Now, let's have a look at Apolitical, right? So they're very similar. It's a lot of the same content. It's just a slight tweak in terms of how it's delivered and who the audience is. So this is focused on civil servants. They talk about being the place where public servants come to connect and learn. To learn about what? Well, all of the issues that you would expect. So it's climate, it's innovation, it's cities, it's local government, digital data and AI, equity, justice and inclusion, right? These are neo-Marxist terms being embedded into the political and non-political sides of the way that our government operates in the UK and across 170 countries around the world. This is absolutely huge, right? It's run by this woman on the left, another woman, Rubin. She's the co-founder and the CEO. She was also a Gates Cambridge scholar. We talked about Gates Cambridge last week and the influence that they're having on the university. Well, she's a product of that system. She's got a big team, predominantly women. This is a very female-dominated space, by the way. Apparently, global fascism is fine as long as it's wearing a pair of stilettos. That seems to be the approach here. Lisa Witter, who we talked about earlier, is also on the board. Rubin Scott is a young global leader of the World Economic Forum as well. By the way, I think I missed that. Apologies if I didn't, if I'm repeating myself. And they have an astonishing array of advisors, right? I've just picked out 3 here, but they've got well over 50 people, extraordinarily well linked. And we've got Jeff Mulgan, Sir Jeff Mulgan, CBE, former chief executive of Nesta, founder of Demos, currently doing loads of work for the Rockefeller Foundation. You've got Paul Kirby, who used to run the number 10 policy unit for David Cameron, and now runs global, or actually was running global government for KPMG. And also General Sir Nick Carter, who was until recently head of the UK Armed Forces, ran the 77th Brigade through COVID, and now works for Tony Blair, right? So we're seeing a lot of the same faces crop up. They're very well backed. So they've got a $5 million grant. This actually just came out this week or last week from google.org to train 1 million civil servants in AI, right? So this is a naked power grab, right? The way that I see this, they are radically retraining, reshaping, reframing political and civil servants to affect the agenda of the global elites who are backing this organization. And you can actually see there the pilot program for that AI Academy was backed by the Rockefeller Foundation. It's embedded right into the heart of central government here in the UK. So they actually partner with the Cabinet Office right next to the Prime Minister. They're doing that in close collaboration with EY, as we've talked about previously. So you can see that EY have had them on their podcast leading into tomorrow. And then Josie Kluwer, who's the EY partner leading the UK government programme to retrain 500,000 UK civil servants, is sharing apolitical content and possibly delivering joint programmes with them at the centre of UK government, right? Funded by Daniel Sachs, controlled by all the global organisations that we talked about. Just to close off, I'm going to bring Starmer into the mix, actually, because he's adjacent to this as well, as you expect. A lot of this relates to Democracy Next. It's an organisation we've talked about previously, also backed by Rockefeller Open Societies. They're focused on democratic innovation, sortition, citizens' assemblies, all that kind of thing. There was a fantastic hour-long video with Lisa Witter from Apolitical and Georgia Gould, the Mayor of Camden, talking to Claudia Chalice, who's the Chief Executive of Democracy Next. I'm going to put that on my Substack over the weekend, riseuk.substack.com. I'd love to show you some now, but I just don't have time. But essentially what they're talking about is using AI and democratic innovation to radically transform the UK political system. And Georgia Gould is thick as thieves with Keir Starmer. They're best mates. They're always hanging out. This is them back in April up in King's Cross with the UK head of AstraZeneca. So I think that Starmer in particular, who wants to run the country, should be being asked some very probing questions about Apolitical and his relationship with it and the people behind it.
Indeed. Undoubtedly, we'll talk a little bit more on that in extra. Debbie, back to health then. And, well, is everybody coughing?
Well, that's a really good question. And you know what? Before I start on coughs, I've written a couple of notes. So excuse me while I read these, because there's so much going on. I'm giving you a rest from E. coli this week. However, that story's still rumbling on. We've got Mpox rumbling on. We've got in Finland, they're going to be giving bird flu jabs to humans. We've got hospitals masking up. So there's a load of stories, but I'm going to focus this week on cough, because what is the 100-day cough? I didn't know actually that the 100-day cough is whooping cough. And as you can see, Time Out talking about the 100-day cough. And further on in the article, it actually says, have you noticed a lot more coughing and spluttering? And have you noticed that whooping cough is on the rise? So it's strange, isn't it, that it seems to be on the rise now, especially. Perhaps it's got something to do with the boosters being rolled out. I'm not sure. But if we go to another story on ITV, we can see that the NHS advice is now saying that many children are suffering. But we really do have to ask ourselves why. So I went to an academic paper and I found this: the impact of COVID-19 pandemic on Bordetella pertussis infections. Pertussis is the other name for whooping cough. That's what causes whooping cough. And they seem to want to believe, to make us believe that this is because of a low uptake on vaccines due to the lockup. And then when all the restrictions were eased, all of a sudden, these diseases have resurged. That's what they would like you to think. But of course, we know that this is all about immunisation and vaccination. So I went to the UK HSA because it's always good to look and see what they've said. And they've updated their guidance on pertussis. They say that it's one of the most infectious diseases during the early catarrhal phase, and it remains infectious for up to 21 days following the onset of coughing. Take note on that. But let's look at the case definition for pertussis, because you can get yourself a diagnosis of whooping cough in a number of ways. So there's suspected. So you can be diagnosed if you're suspected. And paroxysms means a spasm, when you go into that horrible coughing spasm. I can't even say it actually. Post-tussive is when you cough so much you end up being sick. And then you've got that inspiration-y whoop where you kind of breathe in and whoop, you hear that noise, or you've got a 14-day cough. So if you're suspected of having any of those, you're more than likely going to be diagnosed whooping cough. Then you've got confirmed. So you can have a test, you can have a PCR test, you can have a sputum test, and that can confirm, or it can be epidemiological. So if somebody's been in contact with somebody, then also you could then be under suspicion, if you like. And they're looking at contact tracing, and family members are classified as close contacts. And they also talk about exclusion as well. And what is exclusion? Because we've heard that so many times. So they say, given the current level of pertussis activity in the population and the likely of asymptomatic, where have we heard that before? Asymptomatic infection, exclusion beyond 14 days to prevent ongoing transmission is unlikely to have a significant impact at population level in the majority of cases. It says the current epidemiological context recommendations for exclusion have been revised. Well, how have they been revised? Let's have a look and see how they've been revised. So if children are suspected or have a confirmed case of whooping cough, they need to be excluded from schools and nursery schools for 48 hours following commencement of antibiotic therapy, or if they don't have treatment, they are excluded for 14 days following the onset of a cough. But what if you can't get antibiotics? And we'll come on to that in a minute. Staff nurseries and childcare settings are exactly the same. However, for a hospitalised patient, you would have to go into respiratory isolation for 48 hours until a treatment's been completed. But what treatment? We don't know what treatment they'll be offering in hospitals. And if you choose not to have treatment or you don't need treatment, you remain in lockup for 21 days, which I thought was fairly excessive, especially if you've got an elderly person or a young person in hospital. Now, in Australia, they always say what happens in the southern hemisphere happens in the northern hemisphere. And already in Australia, we have parents going from pharmacy to pharmacy looking for antibiotics because there is an antibiotic shortage, in particular clarithromycin and azithromycin. And it's azithromycin I actually want to concentrate on. But already in the UK, we're already seeing cases rise. They're already putting the frighteners out on everybody. And we have a shortage of clarithromycin. Now, back in 2020, Fierce Pharma put out an article because Pfizer and Teva, but Pfizer, let's focus on Pfizer. Pfizer make azithromycin. This is an antibiotic. They were in shortage of it back in 2020. It's really cheap to make antibiotics. It's really quick to make antibiotics. Pfizer are very, very good at making mRNA, upscaling a very complex gene therapy, and yet they can't seem to produce antibiotics. And in New South Wales, they've actually issued a safety notice, disruption to supply of azithromycin, and there you can see a couple of bottles. And why is all of this? What are they pushing? Well, of course, they're pushing vaccination in pregnancy. Here's a very, very short video to show you the kind of stuff they're pumping out.
Whooping cough is on the rise. Getting your vaccination during pregnancy can prevent hospitalisation. Ideally, we recommend that all women that are pregnant have the vaccine between the gestation of 16 to 32 weeks of pregnancy. If you have passed this gestation, then please don't be alarmed, you can still have the vaccine. Young babies with whooping cough can often become very unwell and need to come into hospital. Whooping cough can cause, in some cases, pneumonia and the worst case scenario, permanent brain damage. The immunity from the vaccination will pass from mum to baby. This will help protect your baby up until the baby has the first vaccinations carried out at 8 weeks old. The whooping cough vaccine is offered at your routine antenatal appointment at 16 weeks of gestation. If you're unsure where to obtain it, you can contact your GP. This can also be offered at a lot of your antenatal clinic appointments. If you are more than 16 weeks pregnant and you have not had the whooping cough vaccine, please get in touch with your GP or your community midwife to get vaccinated.
And can I just urge a word of caution? I had whooping cough as a child. My son had whooping cough as a baby. They recovered very well. I spoke to Dr. Ahmed Malik a couple of days ago. His children have just had whooping cough too. Babies are born with the most incredible immune systems. They have thymus glands that provide them with all the immunity they need. We should not be vaccinating pregnant women during pregnancy. And I would just urge caution because many of these children, most of these children get better all on their own. And there are plenty of alternatives to antibiotics with regards to herbal medicine as well. So just be prepared, don't be scared.
Debbie, thank you for that. Now, we're going to end, we can't end the programme without going across the Atlantic to the clown show that's happening over there as well. Let's bring them on screen. I'm not certain that either of these is a better option, I have to say. But anyway, let's kick this off with just a little bit of video here. Well, a lot of people will have seen some of this already, but let's just see how this went. The debate that took place last night, supposed debate anyway.
I'd love to ask him, and will, why he allowed millions of people to come in here from prisons, jails, and mental institutions to come into our country and destroy our country.
President Trump, we will get to immigration later in this block. President Biden, I want to give you an opportunity to respond to this question about the national debt.
He had the largest national debt of any president in a 4-year period, number one. Number two, that $2 trillion tax cut benefited the very wealthy. What I'm going to do is fix the tax system. For example, we have 1,000 trillionaires in America. Billionaires in America. If they just paid 24%, or 25%, either one of those numbers, they'd raise $500 billion, I should say, in a 10-year period. We'd be able to wipe out his debt. We'd be able to help make sure that all those things we need to do, child care, elder care, making sure that we continue to strengthen our healthcare system, making sure that we're able to make every single solitary person eligible for what I've been able to do with the with the COVID, with dealing with everything we have to do with, look, if we finally beat Medicare.
Thank you, President Biden. President Trump?
Well, he's right. He did beat Medicare. He beat it to death.
So it was quite a clown show, but not unexpectedly so, because I mean, what was anybody expecting? And the question has to be asked: why did they even hold it? We might have an answer to that in a second. As you might expect, there was lots of rallying around went on, well, let's just have a look at this.
You were out there getting a chorus of questions about whether Biden should step down. There is panic that has set in. There is panic that has set in among people who have watched this debate, who are Democrats, people who are strategists, and some even inside Democratic campaigns. Yeah. Do you think it's unfounded?
Well, I think it's unhelpful, and I think it's unnecessary. We've got to go in and got to keep our heads high. And as I say, we've got to have the back of this president. You don't turn your back because of one performance. What kind of party does that? It's been a masterclass. 15.6 million jobs. That's 8 times more than the last 3 Republican presidents combined. The only thing the last 3 Republican presidents have in common is recessions. Democrats delivered. This president has delivered. We need to deliver for him at this moment. With all due respect, the more time we start having these conversations, go down these rabbit holes, it's unhelpful to our democracy, our fate and future of this country, the world. They need us right now to step up, and that's exactly what I intend to do.
Well, the question is, how far will he step up? Because he, along with Michelle Obama and possibly Kamala Harris, are looking like they're aiming to get Biden off the ballot and replace him with them. So it's still not too late for them to do that. We'll see what happens. But perhaps we leave it to the Russians to sum this up. So this is from Sputnik. So that was their take on the thing. That was what they heard as they watched the debate. Even in the mainstream press, people are apparently suggesting it's time for Biden to go. This is a headline in the New York Times today. Biden is a good man and a good president. He must bow out of the race. And then the question of why this even took place in the first place. Maybe this tweet gives us a clue. So this tweet says, MSNBC's Nicole Wallace just said conversations will take place to replace Biden tomorrow. It's not just a coincidence the left is ruling against Joe. The debate was a setup to replace Biden with Gavin Newsom that we just saw, Michelle Obama or Kamala Harris. So I think there's probably quite a lot to be said for that comment, because I just for the life of me cannot grasp why they even allowed this to happen, because it was inevitable that this would be the outcome. So anyway, we'll talk more about that in Extra, I'm quite sure. I'm going to say thank you very much to Ben and Debbie for joining me today. Thank you all for watching. If you're a UK column member, we'll be back in a few minutes for some Extra. Otherwise, we will see you on Monday and for a special news program. So join us then. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye.